Dear friends, welcome all of you to this interactive session where today we are going to understand various development phases of Indian art. Let's assume ourselves as a visitor to the exploration journey of Indian art, which will be covered under few topics: prehistoric art, Buddhist painting, Rajput painting, Sultanate painting, Mughal painting, and some works of modern period. We all agree with the fact that, moved by the charm of the nature around him, man has expressed his appreciation of it in works of art produced by him. This goes back to a time when he was still a primitive. Art has had a softening influence on him. It is a great and true experience that Kalidas expresses when he feels that even the happiest man is elated when he sees beautiful things or hears melodious notes. Though music deeply stirs the heart, it is the impression of the beautiful form on the eye that has an even greater effect. No section of the population of India can afford to neglect her ancient heritage. Let's take a heritage walk across the treasure of Indian art in reference to the Indian painting. Indian paintings historically revolved around the religious deities and king. Indian art is a collective term for several different schools of art which existed in the Indian subcontinent. The paintings varied from large frescoes of Allura to the intricate Mughal miniature paintings to the metal embellished works from the Tanjore school. The paintings from the Gandhar Takshila are influenced by the Persian works in the West. The Eastern style of painting was mostly developed around the Nalanda school of art. The works are mostly inspired by various scenes from Indian mythology. When did India start its drawing and painting? There is a question, and Bhimbetka has an answer. It is the site of prehistoric art, some 40 kilometers south of Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh. You will see there a deeply forested area with some 50 to 60 hillocks where lies answer to the above question. It was where hundreds of generations ago prehistoric artists found expressions to their mind. The earliest Indian paintings were the rock paintings of prehistoric times, the petroglyphs as found in places like the rock shelters of Bhimbetka, and some of them are older than 5500 BC. Such works continued, and after several millennia in the 7th century, carved pillars of Ajanta, Maharashtra present a fine example of Indian painting, and the colors, mostly various shades of red and orange, were derived from minerals. There is always a curiosity in our mind as of how did early people paint. It may be observed, however, that Paleolithic art is mainly a phenomenon, remote and isolated, and this specially applies to Indian painting. There is a hiatus of probably thousands of years between these apparently dateless specimens of the early culture of India and the first actual historic record of the art. What may be considered the most ancient concrete example of datable painting is to be found on the walls of Jogi Mara cave of the Ramgarh hills in Sirguza, a very small and remotely situated state in the central provinces. These frescoes are presumed to have been executed about the 1st century before the Christian era. The foregoing description of these early brush forms, for they are little one, conveys the impression that the general character, except for the one special quality which is already referred to, is distinctive primitive, and that the art was at this period, judging from these crude effort, in a very undeveloped state. This is a natural deduction derived from an inspection of only surviving specimen of painting known in India before the Christian era. The earliest painting in India have been found in primitive caves and rock shelters in Mirzapur and Banda in UP, in the Mahadev Hills of the Vindhyachal range in Bundelkhand, in the Kaimur Hills in the area of Baghelkhand, in Singhanur in Raigad district of central India, and Bellary in south. These paintings are mainly hunting scene representing man in his encounter with wild animals. At Bhalduria in Mirzapur district, there is a scene of a stag hunt where harpoons and spears are depicted in action. The paintings, though in a crude technique, represent vivid pictures of hunt. Red pigment has been freely used. Some of the figures have got washed off, but in a well-preserved scene, there is a hunt of a bison and a sambar. The human figures are conventionalized. The torso is sometimes drawn as almost a ladder composed of steps, with the head dominating the rest of the body, the hands and feet in all cases appearing as just straight or bent lines. Early art in India has almost a similar form all over the land. The Shungas, the Kushans in the north, the Kalingas in the east, and the Satvahans in the Deccan were the inheritors of common traditions from the Mauryas. And striking similarities in the Shunga, Satvahan, Kalinga, and Kushanad cannot but strike the eye of the connoisseurs. Common motifs with striking resemblance in distant parts of the land do arrest attention. It's interesting to compare the earlier figures from Barhut, Amravati and Cave 10 of Ajanta. Turbans, necklaces, earrings, facial features and the positions of the hands joined in adorations may be noted. When we say Ajanta cave paintings, the Satvahans are to be given the credit. Why? Let's understand it clearly. The earliest historical paintings in India belong to the Satvahan period. The earliest caves at Ajanta are also of the Satvahan period. The paintings cover the walls, pillars, ceilings and illustrate scenes from the life of the master and his previous life, comprising the Jatakas stories. There are also floral and animal motifs dexterously created. The paintings may be assigned to the early phase of the Satvahan rule, probably the time of Satkarni, to whose time the Sanchi gateway carved by the ivory carvers of Vidisha as recorded in an inscription thereon may be assigned. These paintings thus form the predecessors of all the Guptas, Vakatkas and medieval painting all over India. Ajanta caves in Maharashtra, which are the rock-cut cave monuments dating back to the 2nd century BCE and containing paintings and sculptures considered to be the masterpieces of both Buddhist religious art and universal pictorial art. The Kushans were the next in the line contributing to the Indian art. The Kushans were the most powerful ruler after the Shungas in northern India. In fact, having moved on to India from Central Asia through the modern territory of Afghanistan and Pakistan to beyond Mathura in India. That is how there was a distinct school of indigenous traditions with a center at Mathura and another in northwestern frontier. With the coming of India, the Graeco-Roman and Iranian elements, which with Chinese influences made up a strange and interesting school of art, offering fascinating facets of culture for studies. It's amazing how various Indian motifs have found excellent impression and interpretation, and that expressions comes then in the Central Asian sculpture and paintings too. A painting of Buddha from Balavasta, which is now in that National Museum collection of Central Asian antiques, is the most interesting of all representations of Buddha from anywhere in the world. This is the painting of the Kushan period with a clear Srivatsa mark on the master's chest. We know that as a Mahapurusha, Buddha has also this mark, but always covered by a cloak. It has never been presented in any of the Indian representation of Buddha. The mountain Meru with the serpent Vasuki wound around it in a pool is a symbol of the churning of the ocean by the gods and the demons to bring out ambrosia. The contribution of the Gupta dynasty is far beyond comprehension. So let's cover the contribution of the Guptas to the art, Indian art specifically. The Gupta emperors were great patrons of art and literature. This phase of art of the Gupta period is amply illustrated in the caves close to the village Bagh in the former Gwalior state, which are excavated on the slopes of Vindhya mountain at a height of about 150 feet above the river Bagh in the vicinity. The paintings in the Bagh caves are mostly lost. The heavy pillars that once supported the verandas are now lost, and the roof has also collapsed, leaving the paintings exposed to weather. The subject illustrated is clearly a Jataka or Avdana yet to be identified. In a painting scene represented by a mirthful Hali Salasya, which is found there in the same cave painting, a folk dance with the dancers in a ring keeping time with little wooden sticks. Two in the group of damsels play the hand drum or the huduka, and the third plays a small sized crumbles. The colorful dress of these damsels, and particularly of the two dancers wearing long sleeved shirt with flowers worked on them, are most interesting for a study of the life and culture of the age. The scene beyond the show a procession of people on horseback and elephants. The elephants are magnificent representation of their class and can rank with any of the very best at Ajanta. Composed of cavaliers and foot soldiers with bows and arrows in their hands, and with the umbrella held over at least two stately figures with princes or tuskers and high-ranking women on cow and elephants close to the royal gateway, probably in the vicinity of the palace, suggest an important event in the royal household and the procession associated with that. There was a long period in the history of Indian art which is dominated by the Buddhist period. So how can we forget about the Buddhist period and beautiful paintings which have been carved out during this era? With the dawn of the Christian era, we find ourselves on the threshold of the classical period in the history of Indian painting. Buddhism was largely the religion of the country and continued the creed of the majority of the people until Brahmanism again prevailed. Taranath, the 17th century historian, already quoted records the fact that whatever Buddhism prevailed, skillful religious artists were found. And in India, this undoubtedly applies to the art of painting. Time has destroyed much, but enough survives of the work of the artist, priest of the Buddhist period, to indicate that this craftsman was a founder of a great school of painting. The origin and growth of this school was very natural one. Buddhism is essentially graphic. The early history of the cult lends to illustrations by the brush more than the pen, and the original traditions were largely pictorial. Pictorially illuminated scrolls would be a portable agency for conveying to the uninitiated the Gospels of Gautama, and these were probably largely used by the priest on their long journey. The temple banners, Tanka of Nepal and Tibet, are undoubtedly a survival of this ancient method of spreading the religion by means of painted pictures. As India was a birthplace of Buddhism, it is to be assumed that it was also the birthplace of the Buddhist school of painting. The gradual growth of the art may be partly followed in that fine series of frescoes at Ajanta, which illustrate an early stage of the painting, as well as examples of it at a later period. The rock-cut temples of Ajanta are set in a lonely ravine excavated in the face of an almost perpendicular scarp of rock is a series of caves, 29 in number. Out of 29 excavations forming the complete series of caves at Ajanta, only 16 of these are recorded in 1879 as containing painting in a greater or lesser degree. In 1910, frescoes are found in 6 out of 16 caves thus embellished. These 6 are numbers 1, 2, 9, 10, 16 and 17. And in all of them, the whole of the walls and also the pillars and ceilings have been painted. Owing to various circumstances, the art of painting, as illustrated in caves 9 and 10, temporarily declined after this period, but was subsequently revived by a school of artists who executed the later work. Except that one or perhaps two of the scenes have been identified as depicting contemporary historical episode. The subjects throughout are exclusively Buddhist. They are all associated with the Jatakas, a collection of stories recording the previous incarnation of Buddha. The greater part of the fresco at Ajanta, supplemented by the remains at Bagh, and the friezes at Srigia may be regarded as records of the consummations of the Buddhist painting in India. The establishment of this powerful empire, together with the settled conditions of the country due to a time of peace and prosperity, acted as a great incentive to all forms of literature and art. In such favorable circumstances, these separate groups of fresco paintings were produced. The historian Taranath throws some useful light on the Buddhist art of painting in India, which may be considered at this stage. He refers to 3 styles of early Buddhist art, which may be described as Deva, the Yaksha and the Naga style. The Deva style was practiced in the country of Magadha for some centuries after the advent of the Buddha, from the 6th century BC to the 3rd century BC. He relates that in the former days, human masters who were endowed with miraculous power produced astonishing works of art. It is expressly stated in the Vinay Agrama and other works that the wall paintings, etc., was such as to deceive by the likeness to the actual things depicted. The Yaksha style, which flourished about the 3rd century BC, as Taranath associated it with King Ashoka. In spite of all the efforts to locate a race of Yakshas, it's clear that the author treats these as a community of supernatural beings, people who were demigods and whose art was of a miraculous order. The Naga style was practiced in the time of Nagarjuna, a writer and philosopher who lived at the beginning of 3rd century AD. Naga artisans, traces of the Naga, an early race who lived under the protection of snakes, are to be found in India from Kashmir to Madras. The stupas of Amravati, erected about the 2nd century AD on the Krishna river, which was a part of Madras Presidency that time, shows many traces of the influence of the Nagas, who appear to have been great architect and artist. Northeast of Mumbai, near Aurangabad, are 2 astonishing series of temples carved out of living rock, and that is still progress. Over the course of 14th century, during the 4th century AD, in a remote valley, work began on the Ajanta caves to create a complex of Buddhist monasteries and prayer halls. As centuries passed, numerous Buddhist monks and artisans dug out a set of 29 caves, converting some to cells and others to monasteries and Buddhist temples. All of these were carved from the rock cliff at Ajanta. These caves are adorned with elaborate sculptures and paintings which have withstood the ravages of time. The sculptures are finely wrought images of animals, gods, deities, while the paintings tell ancient tales of courtly life and depicts hundreds of Buddhist legends. Amid the beautiful images and paintings are sculptures of Buddha, calm and serene in contemplation. With the decay of Buddhism in India in the 7th century AD, the art appears to have declined, and for the exceptionally long period of nearly 1,000 years, the actual examples of Indian paintings which have been handed down to us are very few and far between. These examples consist of several paintings on palm leaves probably of 12th century from Bengal, some Jain book illustration of 15th century, remains of Brahmanical frescoed at Ellora, which may be of the 12th century or earlier, and few other miscellaneous fragments of the art, and this is the medieval period that is dated in between 700 to 1600 AD. From the time that the last painter at Ajanta threw down his brush in AD 650 until we come into contact with the art again, it was revived in the reign of Mughal Emperor Akbar in the later half of the 16th century. The story of painting in India resolves itself very largely into one of inferences. During the later portion of this period, India was also undergoing the thaws of the Mohammedan invasions. Great constitutional changes were taking place, and the country was too disturbed by this epoch-making aggression to produce any noteworthy arts. In its religious aspect too, India was becoming transformed. On the one hand, by the decline of Buddhism and the steady rise of Hinduism in its new and revived form, and on the other side, by the advent and growth of Mohammedanism. There were few specimens of paintings with calligraphy which was firstly introduced in India is called Sultanate painting. The term Sultanate painting should refer to manuscript illustrations or murals commissioned by Muslim patrons in the regions of India ruled by sultans before the founding of Imperial Mughal Attila in 1556 AD. Though the so-called Sultanate period began in 1206 AD, manuscript painting cannot be traced back much earlier than about 1450 AD. Thus, most Sultanate painting dates between about 1450 and 1550, and the centers of production seem to be primarily Mandu in central India, Jaunpur in eastern India, with some work being done in the Delhi region and in Gujarat in western India. The succession of Muslim sultan ruling from Delhi in the 13th and 14th century were more concerned with public building projects, and many of them were opposed to figural paintings for religious reasons. Several examples of the Quran with calligraphy and ornamentation distinctive to India have survived from this period, but they include no figural illumination. Several passages in literature refers to the existence of wall painting during the time of the Delhi Sultanate, but little survives. In 1398, Timur, the Turkic warrior from Central Asia, who is popularly known as Tamerlane, sacked Delhi and defeated the ruling Sultan Firoz Shah Tughlaq. The ensuing decentralization of political power led to changes in the history of Indian art too. Provincial governors in outlying regions gained greater independence and became self-proclaimed sultan. Over the course of the 15th century, these provincial sultans strove to take on the trappings of kingship following the Persian model. The manuscript made for Muslim patrons between 1450 and 1550 vary considerably in style, as there was no unifying force in the production of these works. Some of the early works were heavily reliant on Turkmen prototypes, namely paintings made in Shiraz in eastern Iran or in Herat in Central Asia. It appears that the painters themselves were typically Indian, trained in the stylized and highly conservative indigenous styles, exemplified by illuminations of devotional manuscript commissioned especially by Jains in Western India. but also by Buddhists in Eastern India and by few Hindus too. These Indian artists were apparently charged with adopting the Turkmen style, and different artists produced work with greater or lesser fidelity to their foreign sources. Most of the surviving examples of the 15th century Sultanate painting are significant more for historical than aesthetic reasons. Among the more visually engaging works is a Shahnama of about 1450, now dispersed primarily among museum and private collections in Europe. The manuscript is arranged in a vertical format with horizontal illustration and 4 columns of Persian text. The paintings are closely related to the indigenous Western or Central Indian styles of painting in non-Muslim sacred text of the existing time. A remarkable manuscript called Niyamat Nama, painted in Mandu in central India around 1500, is a book of recipes which shows the sultan surrounded by attendants preparing foods, medicines, etc. The painters of the pictures were Indian, but they drew heavily from Shirazi models, with much use of thick green swords, pastel background colors, and provincial Persians figural types. Indian elements are especially noticeable in the renditions of the Indian ladies who were part of his extensive multicultural harem. By the mid-16th century, a harmonious fusion of Persian and Indian style was achieved, which was seen especially in the paintings illustrating the adventures of the lovers Chanda and Lorak in Chandayana of about 1540 AD. The text was composed by a Muslim poet in India, written in the northeastern dialect of Hindi known as Awadhi in Persian script, and the paintings were painted by a Hindu artist. Artists working in this unique hybrid style, characterized by bright pastel colors, repeated ground patterns, delicate line drawing, and exquisite arabesque, were particularly influential in the early decades of Imperial Mughal Italy. Indian miniature painting, and that too without mentioning the contribution of Rajput, is incomplete. Rajput painting, a style of Indian painting, evolved and flourished during the 18th century in the royal courts of Rajputana, India. Each Rajput kingdom evolved a distinct style, but with certain common features. Rajput paintings depict a number of themes, events, and epics like Ramayana and the Mahabharata, Krishna's life, beautiful landscapes, and humans. Miniatures were the preferred medium of Rajput painting, but several manuscripts also contain Rajput painting, and paintings were even done on the walls of palaces, inner chambers of the forts, Havelis, particularly the Haveli of the Shekhawats. The colors extracted from certain minerals, plant sources, conch shells, and were even derived by processing precious stones, gold and silver were used. The preparation of desired colors was a lengthy process, sometimes taking weeks also. Brushes used were very fine. The main themes around which Rajasthani paintings of India revolved include the great epics of Ramayana and Mahabharata, the life of Lord Krishna, landscape, and humans also. Rajasthan, which is the land of the Rajputs, it was of a mixed race. Some of the Rajput clans were the descendants of the foreign tribes like Huns, Sakas, Kushans, Gurjars, and others belonged to the old Kshatriyas tribe. Pride of race, sense of honor, and self-respect were the key ingredients which helped them to gain power in the whole of the northern, western, and central India. The rise of the Rajput dynasty synchronized with the advent of the Islam, who extended their power towards India. The Rajput played a difficult role in protecting the Hindu faith, in patronizing Hindu culture and preserving Hindu traditions and customs, and defending Hindustan against the repeated Muslim invasions. In the Rajasthan painting, the mirrored life of the Rajasthan could be seen as lived by the royalty or the common men, the beauty of their women and the feelings of their inspired and devoted hearts. The Rajasthan school of miniature painting gradually emerged out of the Western India tradition in the 16th century. In the earlier period, it was a continuation of mural paintings of the classical period, and as prescribed in the Shastras, the work of this school are chiefly book illustration. The Jain miniature paintings of illustrated manuscript had exercised a wide and profound influence in the evolution of Rajasthani painting. In the beginning of the 16th century, the Kulhadar group was introduced. Its important features are: the faces are in profile, the setting is natural or architectural, the lines are vigorous and rhythmical, the figures appears to be ardent and energetic, the strong and contrasting colors are used with fine effect. Fine specimen of the early Rajasthan school are Geet Govinda series of circa 1618 in the N.C. Mehta collection. In the last quarter of the 16th century, the Mughal impact on the indigenous style brought about a marked change in the outlook of the miniature painters, and the Rajasthani artists started adopting the technical excellence of the Mughal style in their painting. It, however, continued to make use of brilliant color, which is the particular hallmark of the Rajasthani painting. The Rajasthani school flourished from the 16th century to the 19th century in a widespread area against the background of Vaishnava Renaissance. Vaishnavism stirred the innermost depth of the common consciousness and brought about psychological change in the mood of the people. The artist therefore drew his inspiration from the old religious stories, myths, folklore and the bhakti mysticism as reflected in the works of poets like Jaidev, Chandidas, Vidyapati, Surdas and Mirabai. The Ragmala and Naikas were favorite themes in the several sets of paintings which have come to light. According to a renowned art collector and himself a very great painter, Ganguly states, the schools of Rajput art embody a whole cycle of Hindu culture, chiefly covered doctrine of love and faith. Though rooted in the classical Sanskrit culture, it takes the form of a vernacular folk art, the pictorial analogue to the great body of Hindu literature, inspired by the Renaissance of the Puranic Hindu religion. The most absorbing themes for the paintings are furnished by the cult of Krishna, idolized in a series of religious mysteries, the gopis being the symbols of the soul's divine. Whatever be the theme, in expression, Rajput art is always lyrical and passionate. Dr. Kumaraswamy points out about the Rajput art in this way, that Rajput art creates a magic world where all men are heroic, all women are beautiful and passionate and shy. This magic world is not unreal or fanciful, but a world of imagination and eternity, visible to all men who do not refuse to see with the transfiguring eye of love. Rajasthani pictorial art shows all that is best and of universal appeal in the emotional life of the Indian people. The work of the Rajasthani painters deserves to be given an honorable place amongst the great arts of the world. Its inspiration is rooted in the people's heart. Keeping close to their poetry, music and drama, its central theme is love. What Chinese art achieved for landscape is here accomplished for human love. The painting of Amber and Jaipur show strong Mughal influence. However, at the same time, the bold composition and use of abstractions reflected regional characteristics. The 18th and the early 19th centuries saw Rajput paintings illustrating episodes from the life of Krishna. The other popular themes of 19th century were Ragmala and devotional subjects. Let's analyze the contribution of various schools of art which belongs to the Rajasthan School of Art. Firstly, Bikaner. Rajasthani painting of Bikaner were also based on Mughal tradition. Apart from the Mughal style, the paintings of Bikaner also reflect marked influence of Deccan paintings. During the late 18th century, the city started showing conservative Rajput styles with smoothness and abstractions. However, they were devoid of any pomposity and flamboyance. Second school of art is Bundi. Rajput paintings started originating in Bundi around the late 16th century and reflected heavy Mughal influence. Wall paintings dating back to the reign of Rao Ratan Singh 1607 to 1631 are good examples of Bundi style of painting. The time of Rao Chhatar Sal, time period is 1631 to 1658, and Bhau Singh 1658 to 1681 AD, saw great emphasis on court scenes as theme. Other themes include those based on the lives of nobles, lovers and ladies. Then comes another school of Rajasthani art is Kota. Kota paintings look very natural in their appearance and are calligraphic in their execution. The reign of Jagat Singh 1658 to 1684 saw vivacious colors and bold lines being used in portraiture. With the arrival of Arjun Singh 1720 to 1723, the paintings started depicting males with a long hooked nose. 18th century was also the time for hunting scenes, Ragmalas and portraits as a theme. Ram Singh II 1827 to 1866 ordered the depiction of worship, hunting, darbar and processions as a main topic in all the paintings. Next in the line for the Rajput painting is the place Kishangarh. Kishangarh style of painting was basically a fusion of Mughal and regional style. The most common theme of this style consisted of the depiction of the love between Krishna and Radha. Other popular themes included the poetry of Savant Singh, Shahnama and court scene, etc. Kishan school is best known for its Bani Thani paintings. With the demise of Savant Singh and his leading painters, this school lost its glory and started breaking down. Next school is Malwa, which is one of the most conservative Rajput painting schools of the 17th century. Malwa was highly influenced by Chaura Pancha Sika style. The emphasis was laid on strong colors and bold lines. At times, one can also observe a remote Mughal influence on these paintings. Marwar. The earliest example of the Rajasthani paintings of Marwar is that of Ragmala painting, which were painted in Pali in 1623 AD. In the 18th century, the most common themes included the portraiture of nobles on horses and darbar scenes. With the arrival of artists like Dalchand, Marwar painting also started reflecting Mughal influence. Next in the line is the Mewar school of Rajput painting, which concentrated on its conservative style, trying to avoid the dominance of the Mughals. The earliest example of the Mewar school is that of Chawand Ragamala, dating back to 1605 AD. One can observe heavy similarity with the Chaura Pancha Sika style, especially the flatness, the bright colors and even the common motifs. Towards the end of the 17th century and the early 18th century, Mewar style saw revival and late 18th century again witnessed its decline. From mid-19th century to the mid-20th century, it continued as a court art. In the history of Indian art, there were so many art forms which are either lost or are on the verge of extinction. In this category, the Lipakshi paintings requires attention which are not being preserved properly. Lipakshi paintings belongs to the Vijayanagar era, but in the lost form. Sad. The temples in Lipakshi town of Anandpur district in Andhra Pradesh are home to some of the most beautiful paintings of Vijayanagar period which is available today. The Papaneshwar temple in Lipakshi was built in 1535 AD and others in the neighborhood must be of the familiar time frame. Around this temple one can just find beautiful artworks belong to the Vijayanagar art. The contributing factors of the Mughal rule, how can we forget about the Mughal lineage, in the cultural field is a topic of detailed discussion. Let us try to analyze in brief. Babur, descendant of Timur and the original founder of the Mughal dynasty in India, speaks of Behzad in his memoirs as the most eminent of all painters, and it is evident from his writings in his biography that this monarch had studied his pictures most critically. It was with the descendants of such a school as Behzad's and under the personal patronage of the Emperor Akbar, grandson of such a connoisseur as Babur, that the Mughal school of painting came into being. From this, it will be understood that fundamentally, the Mughal school of painting was an exotic, just as the Mughals themselves were aliens in India, but in the same way as that race has gradually absorbed into the people of Hindustan, so Mughal painting has come to be regarded as an integral part of the art of India. For side by side with these foreign artists worked the indigenous painters of the country, the excellence of whose native skills was speedily utilized by the observant emperor. Such Hindu names as Basavan, Daswanath, Kesudasa, famous painters at the court of Akbar, prove the liberal view that was taken at the art of this time. During the time of Akbar, a new school took its origin, and in the early examples of this period, the two styles of work, one, an art of the court, secular and eclectic in its character, had no profound associations with the people or the country. It gave pleasures to princely connoisseurs, but outside the palace, it was originally little known. As time progressed, it became more democratic, and its decadence, it's true, it pertains to lower strata, but mainly in the form of popular portraiture. For one outstanding feature of the paintings of the Mughal is its devotion to the delineations of likelessness. Realism is its keynote, and their subjects are largely drawn from incidents connected with the magnificent court life of the time. In scale, the Mughal picture in small, never attaining the dignity and size of the Buddhist frescoes, and under the popular name of miniature paintings, its connection with Persian book illustration may be observed. A record of some 40 artists known to have lived during the reign of Akbar, many of whom were retainers of the royal court, will serve to indicate the flourishing condition of the art. But it was left to the Emperor Jahangir to develop Mughal paintings to its fullest extent. The notable artistic sense of his ancestor Babur was rekindled with additional force in Jahangir, and one of his monarch's innocent pride lay in the skill and genius of his court painters. Europeans were beginning to reach the capital of the great Mughal in the first half of the 17th century, and more than one of these travelers relates the great interest that Jahangir took in the production of his retained artist. Portraiture and hunting scenes were the favorite subjects of his time, but the more scientific fields of botany and natural history were objects of special study. Unusual flowers or rare animals were ordered to be copied by the emperors, and some of these pictures, most elaborate and faithful reproduction, have survived to the present day. Western paintings were also arriving in the country during this period, and the copying of these were frequently indulged in. Portraits of Europeans, obviously facsimiles of Occidental paintings, are occasionally forthcoming, and pictures illustrating incidents in connections with Christianity, which was then making its appearance in India, are not rare. All these date from the time of Jahangir, when the paintings of the picture was given every encouragement and was fully appreciated by the ruling class. Under the succeeding rule of Shah Jahan, the Mughal school shows the first signs of deterioration. The robust character of the work executed in the previous reign is not so marked. There is an increased sense of richness and luxury in coloring and composition, and the artist handling is not so vigorous. Under Shah Jahan, architecture reached its zenith, but painting began to decline. This fact may be another illustration of the one art preceding and the other on account of the facility of manipulation. At the same time, Shah Jahan, as personal predilection for monumental building, accounted for this in some degree, as the Taj Mahal eloquently testified. The quantity of painting executed about this time was maintained, but the quality is slightly inferior. As the art centered around the court, and this was mainly held at Delhi during the reign of Shah Jahan, the Delhi Kalam originated, and it is a form of art maintained in a somewhat debased manner to the present day. With the advent of Aurangzeb, the decadence of the Mughal school steadily continued, and it is doubtful whether it received much personal encouragement from this bigoted ruler. A large proportion of the miniature paintings of the Mughals are portraits, but at the same time, the subjects of an appreciable quantity of the work of this school are of a general order. These are mainly scenes from actual life, hunting, fighting, battles, sieges, historical episodes, darbars, mythological stories, zoology, botany, and very occasionally religious incidents. There is no mysticism and rarely pictures of domestic life. The Mughal miniature is distinguished from any other style of Indian painting by one feature, which at once proclaims its foreign origin. This is the calligraphic character of its outline. Next in line in the study of Indian paintings comes the Deccan school. The artistic creation of the Deccan India is also quite fascinating. A distinctive style of painting with local variation developed in the Sultanate court in the Deccan. The early phase of the Deccan school is characterized by a sumptuous grandeur, a rich color scheme, fine draftsmanship, elongated forms, and swirling draperies. The later phase is marked by the influence of the Mughal school, which found its way to the Deccani court due to the political changes. Bijapur and Golconda were the followers of Shia sect of Islam and had intimate political and cultural relations with the rulers of Persian, Turkish and indigenous styles of painting, and developed a new style known as the Deccani style of painting. Certain spatial features are noticeable in Deccani painting. The principal figure is bigger than the subordinate figures, and this was artistically balanced by the richness of the palette. The necklace with the plaque was considered as a favorite ornament in the Deccan. Jahangir even sent a jewelled plaque of this type to Ibrahim Adil Shah, the Sultan of Bijapur, as a present. Another center of the Deccan school of miniature was Ahmednagar. The earliest known Deccani miniature illustrated at Ahmedabad are found in the manuscript of Tarif Hussain Shahi. Sultan Hussain Nizam Shah, the Sultan of Ahmednagar, after his death, his queen Khanzada Humayun acted as regent for her young son Murtaza I. It was during the period of her regency, that is the time period 1565 to 69 AD, that the poem celebrating the victories and marriage of Hussain was composed and illustrated at Ahmednagar. The paintings show mixture of Persian and the Deccani pictorial elements. The colors used in the paintings, being rich and brilliant, are different from those in the paintings of North India. The Persian influence can be seen in the landscape, the gold sky, the high white rimmed horizon, and flowering shrubs. Burham too rebelled against his own elder brother Murtaza I and fled to Akbar's court in 1583 AD, where he was welcomed. It was through him that the Mughal influence reached the Deccani painting. A masterpiece of Ahmednagar painting is the Hindola Rag of about 1590 AD. In this, a fusion of Persian and Deccani elements are noticeable. Bijapur. The artists of Bijapur were not slavish imitators of the Persian style, and in spite of the Mughal influence, the school of Bijapur retained its individuality in warmth, color tones, preference being given for monochrome background and bold draftsmanship. The founder of the Adil Shahi dynasty of Bijapur, Yusuf Adil Shah, the time period is 1490 to 1510 AD, and his successors Ismail Adil Shah, time period is 1510 to 1534 AD, patronized painting. Chand Sultana, who is popularly known as Chand Bibi, was an adept musician, a calligraphist, and a painter too. During the reign of Adil Shah, a richly illustrated Nuzum-ul-Ulum, Stars of Then Sciences, was produced. It is a 16th century encyclopedia and has 876 paintings. Many of these illustrate weapons, utensils, and others are constellations illustrating the spiritual rulers. There is an influence of the Lipakshi mural paintings on the female type. The rich color scheme, the palm trees, animals, and men and women all belong to the Deccani tradition. The profuse use of gold color, some flowering plants, and arabesque on the top of the throne are derived from the Persian tradition. The bright, deep colors and liberal use of golden color indicate their individuality. Ibrahim Adil Shah too, 1580 to 1626 AD, was himself an expert in Indian music and author of a book on this subject, the Norras Nama. Under his patronage, a number of paintings, especially portraits, were picturized, were made by the artist, which are among the imperial presents sent to the Deccani rulers by the Mughal Emperor Jahangir. After 1672 AD, it suffered a decline and came to an end by the closing years of 17th century, when it was finally annexed by Aurangzeb. Next center of the Deccani painting is Golconda. The earliest painting identified as Golconda work are a group of 5 charming paintings of about 1590 AD, executed in the time period of Muhammad Quli Qutub Shah. The time period is 1580 to 1611 AD. One of the paintings depicts a king in his court watching a dance performance. He wears a white muslin coat with embroidered vertical band, a typical costume associated with Golconda court. Other outstanding examples are Lady with a Mind Bird of about 1605 AD, an illustrated manuscript of a Sufi poem, Muhammad Quli Qutub Shah, who was succeeded by his nephew Muhammad Qutub Shah. The largest painting on cloth were prepared during the reign of Abdullah Qutub Shah, 1626 to 1672, and it was being titled The Procession of Abdullah Qutub Shah. Abdullah Qutub Shah on the throne, Chand Bibi and her maidens were the few other examples. Abdul Tana Shah, 1662 to 87 AD, the last Sultan of Golconda, was a great lover of art. A large number of ragas and raganis, the royal harem, and other romantic themes were painted. Next center was Hyderabad. Due to austerity and preoccupation of Aurangzeb with wars in the Deccan, some painters in the Mughal court had migrated to Hyderabad, where patronage was readily available, and they continued to produce paintings of fine quality. A majority of paintings executed between 1725 to 1750 AD are portraits of Asaf Jah, his sons, nobles, women in a garden or in a terrace, saints, ragini, etc. These have fine colorings with gems like brilliance, sensitive drawings of figures, or penetrating characterization of the personages. Their fine drawings, lyrical quality, careful finish, variety of clouds and trees, rich coloring and compact composition place them in the list of good Deccani miniature. Various forms of expression in Indian art are somewhere related to their religious feelings and somewhere to please the nobility. In this category, the next is the Tanjore painting. Tanjore painting is an important form of classical South Indian painting native to the town of Tanjore in Tamil Nadu. The art form dates back to the early 9th century, a period dominated by the Chola rulers who encouraged art and literature. These paintings are known for their elegance, rich colors, and attentions to detail. The themes for most of these paintings are Hindu gods and goddesses and scenes from Hindu mythology. In modern times, these paintings have become a much sought after souvenir during festive occasions in South India. The process of making a Tanjore painting involves many stages. The first stage involves the making of the preliminary sketch of the image on the base. The base consists of a cloth pasted over a wooden base, then chalk powder or the zinc oxide is mixed with water-soluble adhesive and applied on the base. To make the base smoother, a mild abrasive is sometimes used. After the drawing is made, decoration of the jewelry and the apparels in the image is done with semi-precious stones. Lace, threads are also used to decorate the jewelries. On top of this, the gold foils are pasted. Finally, dyes are used to add colors to the figures in the painting. Tanjore traditional paintings are a very important form of classical Indian school of paintings, finding their origins to the Chola period of 9th century, which creates a distinct South Indian accent which is attributed to the paintings also. The themes of most of the Tanjore paintings are Hindu gods and goddesses. The following examples which are there in the pictures illustrate the elegance, rich color and distinct Deccan flavor of fine arts. Another peculiar form of expression is Madhubani painting, which is a style of Indian painting practiced in Mithila region of Bihar state, India. The origins of Madhubani paintings are shrouded in antiquity, and a tradition states that this style of painting originated at the time of Ramayana, when King Janak commissioned artists to do paintings at the time of marriage of his daughter Sita with Sri Ram, who is considered to be an incarnation of the Hindu god Lord Vishnu. The close of the Mughal dynasty in AD 1760 found the art of painting in India in a state of decay. In Delhi and Lucknow, a number of artists still carried on their profession. In the last decade of the century, a small but earnest group of Bengali painters grasping the situation, have joined themselves together with the intention of endeavoring or rescuing it from the degradation. Miniature painters employed at various medieval courts discovered the potentials of limitless self-expression in their depiction, and today there are 130 known sets of such miniature. The paintings of Gemini Roy, the time period is 1887 to 1972, a renowned painter of India, are among the most recognizable of Indian painting. Roy was a very important Indian artist of the 20th century. His work have since been declared as national treasures of India and are gaining international acclaim as well. One can see large influence of Bengali tradition in his work, even when the portrayal is of European saints. He was one of the famous painters of the late 19th century to mid 20th century, created his own language of painting which was marked by the traditional folk arts of Bengal, especially the Pata painting. His paintings were the symphony of bold lines, colorful palettes and simple rhythmic life of rural Bengal. Gemini Roy was trained in his formative period in the Bengal school style of painting, and his painting represented as much a revival of folk art as a rebellion against the delicate drawing and hazy colors of Bengal stature of their own. They use materials and techniques from all over the world but express Indian realities and Indian experiences. The Bengal School of Art was an influential style of art that flourished in India during the British Raj in the early 20th century. It was associated with Indian nationalism but was also promoted and supported by many British art administrators. Following the widespread influence of Indian spiritual ideas in the West, the British art teacher Ernest Winfield Hewell attempted to reform the teaching methods at the Calcutta School of Art by encouraging students to imitate Mughal miniature. This caused immense controversy, leading to a strike by students, complaints from the local press, including from nationalists who considered it to be a retrogressive move. Hewell was supported by the artist Abanindranath Tagore, a nephew of poet Rabindranath Tagore. Tagore painted a number of works influenced by Mughal art, a style that he and Hewell believed to be expressive of India's distinct spiritual qualities as opposed to the materialism of the West. Tagore's best known painting, Bharat Mata, Mother India, depicted a young woman portrayed with four arms in the manner of Hindu deities, holding objects symbolic of India's national aspiration. Tagore later attempted to develop links with Japanese artists as part of an inspiration to construct a pan-Asianist model of art. The leader of this art movement was Abanindranath Tagore. The first step taken by these reformers has necessarily been a retrogressive one. Its members, therefore, have sought out the old historic painting of the past, and on the results acquired from the study of these and other masterpieces of Oriental art, the new movement has been founded. Scenes are taken from the writings of Kalidasa, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Gita, Purans, and incidents of ancient Indian history. The Bengal school arose as an avant-garde of the nationalist movement, reacting against the academic art style previously promoted in India, definitely by the Britishers, both by Indian artists like Raja Ravi Verma and in British art school. It is said that to be an artist like Raja Ravi Verma, a person should be blessed by God to project human form in such an excellent pictorial form. Raja Ravi Verma, the time period is April 29, 1848 to October 2, 1906, was an Indian painter from the princely state of Travancore, who achieved recognition for his depiction of scenes from the epics of Mahabharata and Ramayana. His paintings are considered to be among the best example of the fusion of Indian tradition with the techniques of European academic art. Raja Ravi Verma is most remembered for his paintings of beautiful sari-clad women who were portrayed as shapely and graceful. His exposure in the West came when he won the first prize in the Vienna Art Exhibition in 1873. Raja Ravi Verma died in 1906 at the age of 58. He is considered among the greatest painters in the history of Indian art. Raja Ravi Verma is particularly noted for his paintings depicting episodes from the story of Dushyant and Shakuntala, Nal and Damayanti from the Mahabharata. Ravi's stunning paintings of Indian women and his habit of getting into controversies. He is also a multifaceted person, having made movies, served in India's parliament. His representation of mythological characters has become a part of Indian imagination of the epics. Next in line is the famous painter of India, Maqbool Fida Hussain, popularly known as M.F. Hussain, is perhaps India's most famous artist of modern time. He is described as Picasso of India by Forbes magazine. He formed the Progressive Artist Group in 1948 along with Hevel, Francis D'Souza, Syed Raza and Amrita Shergill. He is one of the most famous artists of India, both at the national as well as international level. The respect for tradition and the ability to transcend it at the same time is clearly evident in Indian art of today. This is the essence of what has been described as the eclecticism of the Indian contemporary expressions. To put it in the form of the art is an eminent painter, Jatin Das. Jatin Das is the part of Indian art for more than 4 decades with his paintings, which depicts the new and the dynamic ways of sketching human figures. He is the master of using colors in an exceptional way, which seems to reveal the tinges of every emotional expression in his paintings. The linear arrangements and brisk brushwork further add a unique dimension to his artworks and express the inner energy of the figures. Indian paintings traditions go back to antiquity, as it is evident from the murals of Ajanta, Ellora and other frescoes. The Buddhist palm leaf manuscript, the Jain text, the Deccan, the Mughal, the Kangra school of miniature Indian painting, and continues till the modern era. Indian painting is an old tradition with ancient texts outlining theories of color and anecdotal accounts suggesting that it was common for households to paint their doorways or indoor rooms where guests resided. Cave paintings from Ajanta, Bagh and Sitanvasar and temple paintings testify to a love of naturalism. Indian paintings provide an aesthetic continuum that extends from the early civilization to the present day. This form of art in India is vivid and lively, refined and sophisticated, bold and vigorous at the same time. From being essentially religious in purpose in the beginning, Indian paintings have evolved over the years to become a fusion of various traditions which influence them. Now, it's our duty to preserve such a precious heritage in whichever way we can, because Indian art is the only exception in the world which can proclaim, yes, I have evolved over the years with each political, social, economic and cultural transition and synthesized every good element within itself. Thank you.